So I'm happy to see everyone here. I'm Robin Thomas, and I'm the founder of Living Well Connections. Living Well Connections is a group a community I founded in order to support, inspire, and educate us all on many aspects of wellness. And financial wellness is an important part of that. So I invited Lindsay to come speak for us, and I'm excited about having her come and speak. Lindsay is originally from Louisiana, but her husband's military career means she calls North Carolina home. After teaching in various states and schools, she made a big leap to a new career as a financial advisor in 2020. Her goal is to empower people to have confidence in their financial decision making. Lindsay's main career is being mom to her two daughters, aged 12 and 15, and loves to take her dog for long walks. Her family can be found hiking or cycling in their free time as they live near Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Robin. To make sure I'm not muted. All right, thank you. So today I will be discussing a very high level overview of being well financially. And so based on our time and some of the content in here, I will probably skip over some of these slides because they are, to me, they're more the nitty gritty of financial wellness, and I want to keep it pretty high level. So as Robin said, I'm Lindsy Lassere. I'm a financial advisor, work with Mass Mutual, North Carolina. And as I usually have to do in these, I start with my disclaimer. So that's the next slide, Robin.
All right.
So this is not, intended to be any replacement for any advice that you would get from your own financial advisor or someone who specializes in taxes or legal advice. I am not a tax advisor, nor am I a lawyer. So if there's any questions you have that could be answered very specifically about those things, I would probably be just referring you to one of those specialties. It's also not intended to be any sort of investment advice. It's just information for you. So Robin's also going to put in the chat. I'm sorry, if not in the chat, she'll send out an email too with a Q&A where you can set up a time to talk to me and ask questions. There will be a question period at the end of this, but if it's something that's more personal and maybe applies just to your specific situation that I can answer for you, I'd be happy to talk to you about that privately. So we'll get to that at the end. So for now, let's go on to our next slide, please. So we're going to define financial well-being. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau defines it as these 4 points. So do you have control over your day-to-day and month-to-month finances? Do you have the capacity to absorb a financial shock? And are you on track to meet your goals? And then finally, do you have the freedom financially to make the choices that build the life that you want to have? So each of the concepts I'll talk about today will actually revert back in some way to one of these 4 points. And so to do that, we're going to talk about a few bigger topics, which is the next slide. And these are the general financial wellness cornerstones, if you will. So things to think about when being well financially: your savings, investing. So we'll start with savings in a moment. It's the foundation of all of them. Then we'll move into investing. And that it ties very closely to saving, and I'll get into that in a moment. Then we'll talk about protecting what you work so hard to achieve. And then retirement planning, very generally, especially if you have a retirement plan through your work. And then we'll move into estate planning. So we're going to go ahead and get started with savings. So as I just said, saving is the foundation of every strategy your loved ones would have. And it begins with setting goals for yourself. So I'm going to tell a story about when I was 13 years old. And it's about saving, but it's the same principle. So first, I set a goal. I saw a purse I wanted at the store. It was very expensive for a 13-year-old who only babysat occasionally. I asked my mom for it. She said, absolutely not. So I went up to the register and I asked the lady, exactly how much. And I said, can you please figure out how much it would be with taxes? I wanted to know down to the cent how much that purse was going to cost. I still remember it, $58.05. I wrote it down and went home and I figured out based on how much I was making on babysitting, how many hours of babysitting it would take me to get to that goal. I had some to start with. I think I had about, like $8 at the time. But I kept track of it every time I made, had a babysitting job. I put the money at a special place, the saving part. And I was able to walk into that store a few months later with down to the cent in cash for that purse. So it's the same idea. It's the same. You set a goal, you figure out exactly how much you want to save, and then you come up with a plan to do that. However, I was 13. I had nothing else, pressuring me to change anything. I had no bills. I had no other priorities, but that is, of course, what all of us as adults have. So how can you save in a way that will, one, be automatic for you, but also help you work towards those goals that you have? So one suggestion is you look at your monthly take-home pay. And let's say we're going to use just the example of 10%. You take 10% of your net monthly income, add it into your monthly spending plan or your budget, and you set it aside every month. And there's automatic transfers, there's direct deposit to make things like this easy. But even that 10%, that can still be further divided into more specific goals for you. And savings overall can be a great way to deal with unforeseen expenses. We also call that an emergency fund. So the general recommendation is 3 to 6 months of an income in an easy to access savings account. How fast you get to that point, of course, is up to how much you save each month. But many people, just to give you an idea, last year realized that 3 to 6 months, whether it was a temporary job loss or a change in circumstances, was not enough. And depending on, your comfort level with that savings amount, some people are saving 9 and 12 months now, aside just for an emergency. So let's get back to the idea that you have 10% saved each month from your paycheck or from your income. You could allocate half of that, to your emergency fund building, put the other half in something else that's more long-term. But whatever your needs are, you can, allocate that savings into things that would meet your goals. So in my case, I always recommend that emergency fund is built first, and then it goes on to your next saving priority. Okay, let's go on to the next one, please. So what many people think of, unfortunately, is that savings are a really nice thing to have. Like, oh yeah, that would be a great cushion to have. But I ask you to switch your thinking to a need to have. So it's a necessity. So think of it as paying yourself first. And that's where things like automatic savings, like direct deposit, or having an automatic transfer set up in your account make it so easy to do this without thinking. So even before that money goes into your regular checking account, it is already saved. Some other things to think about are, it doesn't have to come from your income when you think of savings. So as I said, I don't really like the term budget. I like the term spending plan. To me, a budget sounds very restrictive. But when you think of a spending plan, you can look closely at where your money does go and then realize that, wow, maybe you spend too much on one area than you're comfortable with, or you want to spend more in another area. And having that clear plan, maybe reducing some expenses in one area can help you save more. I've heard many people give talks like this. They use the Starbucks, I pay $5 for coffee. If you have to get coffee out, McDonald's is usually $1. That's kind of a joke for those of us who like coffee very much, but The idea is that you know where your money goes and you reduce your expenses where you can and where you feel is necessary. Okay, let's head on. Just a quick word about debt, because most Americans have debt, and how does that relate to savings? So it's very important to not have a lot of debt. However, for many people, they have this, struggle of, well, do I save or do I pay off my debt? And there are some financial pundits that you will see out in the world that recommend take care of that debt first and then work on savings. And for most people, it's actually not as black and white as that. So what you choose to do, though, is up to you. I'll give you an example. Let's say you choose to be debt free in the next 3 years. Okay, that could happen, but then in 3 years, you also have zero emergency savings. So how about maybe taking 6 years to pay off that debt, and then at the same time you're putting some stuff away in financial savings, so that when you're done at the end of that 6 years without the debt, then you have something already there. You're not starting from zero. So there are ways to do it in a balanced way, and it's up to you to figure out what that balance is. It's usually not all or nothing debt repayment versus savings. All right, now very closely tied to savings is investing. So when we talk about investing, we're talking about putting your money into what we call a financial instrument to save money. To make money, to grow that investment. That's what it would be, to grow it. There's also real estate that you can invest in that I'll get to later if we have time for that. But the ones I'm going to talk about in this section are stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. You could also think about investing in things like cash, like CDs or money market accounts. And those are just kind of also very closely tied to more of a regular savings account, depending on how much you can grow your money in those. So I'm just going to briefly go over the differences between stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. So when we think of stocks, we probably think of the stock market, and we probably think of the bell, the people ringing the bell, which I've always wanted to do, by the way. But they're also called equities. So you might hear that term as well if you're talking to an advisor or you watch a lot of CNBC. And what that means is you are actually buying a share of ownership in a company. So for example, if you are the owner of a stock in Apple or Google or Ford, you actually own a sliver of that company. So excuse me one second. So why do companies have stocks? Well, they want the money. It helps them raise that money, either to fund the business or for whatever they need to do. They actually have to disclose to the government what they're going to use the money for when they sell stocks. So you can find out exactly where your investment is going. Once you own a stock, it's yours. You can buy it, sell it, trade it. There's an open market for them. Bonds also can be traded, but they're a little bit more complex. So these are issued by governments, whether it's a city, state, or federal government. Corporations can also issue them. And so what happens is that the bond is issued, you buy the bond, the government gets that money, and then will repay that loan from you. So it's basically loaning money to that government or corporation. So for example, if a city issues bonds to help pay for a new toll bridge, they will be able to repay those bonds with the tolls that they get in, the income that they get. So those have their own special rules and taxes as with stocks. So, excuse me, again, very high level overview. Mutual funds, though, are actually incredibly common. It's a great way for someone who's just the average or casual investor to have a really diverse portfolio managed by a professional at the cost that they can handle. So for example, a mutual fund could easily have 150 different stocks and bonds in it. If you were to buy those individually and pay, for the management of each of them individually, it's impossible for an average investor to do. But by pooling them together, people are able to have a very diverse portfolio. And there's so many choices out there that someone can help you find which one is best for you, but it's also at a much, much, much lower fees compared to just buying them separately. But despite any investment vehicle you choose, savings account versus CDs versus investing in the stock market or mutual funds, it's important to know why you're doing it. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? If you don't have a financial professional to talk to, that would be a great conversation to start with them. Where and when do you want the money? What do you feel comfortable with investing? How much would you like to get back on your investment? And when do you need it? So that also goes into things like risk. Risk is a very broad word. When I think of risk, I think of things like skydiving. And it's usually not that bad, but it's not a bad analogy. How long do you want to free fall before you pull that chute, kind of thing. But we'll get more into risk in a moment. But the important thing I would like you to understand is that when you are investing, think of it in a long term. I heard an article, heard a presentation on TV the other day on the news, and it was talking about how investing is not very exciting. It should be long term, boring, that can weather things like market ups, downs, recessions, and things like that. So we're not talking about get rich quick schemes here. So let's move a little bit on to risk. So the next model is completely hypothetical. Here's another disclaimer for you. So an investing style, by calling it aggressive or conservative, moderate, it is completely, one, it's hypothetical, but two, it's very, depends on who made the model. So you can look at a moderate investment from one company recommendation and compare it to another, and there will be differences because it's very, I'm blanking on the word I'm trying to say, but anyway, it's very individual. So whoever creates it and things like that. However, there are some newer and more consistent ways to gauge your own personal risk. And some of these can be found online. I actually used one with my clients where it actually, through a series of questions, will come up with a number for you. So there are lots of these out there now, so that it's not as wishy-washy as, well, I'm moderate aggressive. Like that doesn't really have any meaning when you think about it. So anyway, there are things out there, but what goes into these numbers? What goes into these words like moderate and conservative and aggressive when we talk about risk? So one of them is your age. How much time do you have until retirement? Not just your age, how old are your kids? Do you want to help them pay for college? The second factor is, goes back to that skydiving idea I had. So how much can you stand to lose if you put some money into the stock market or other investments? How long until you have to pull that chute and you say, nope, that's enough. I'm not comfortable at that level anymore when the market starts to go south. Another thing is how much you know about investing. This is a huge factor in your risk tolerance. I'll give a recent example. So the GameStop debacle that happened back in January, people made some money on that. The stock, if you followed it, it started out really low. It rose, hundreds of % in a few days. Some people sold it, made a lot of money. However, some of them, and I read this article in a financial magazine, they didn't consider the taxes on that short-term investment that they would have to pay. So just that knowledge could affect, your risk tolerance as well. And then finally, it comes down to your personal comfort level. Sometimes you might say, well, yeah, I'll take a risk on that company because I know a lot about that. And others, you're like, oh man, I don't know. I'm more conservative on that one. So there are many, many different considerations. Again, I have a free questionnaire that I'd be happy to share with you. It's just the link comes up with the number for you. But there's others online as well that you can find. And again, just talking to a financial professional could help you figure out more about your taxes. So I'm going to skip ahead and I'll tell you,
That one.
we're going to go to the one that says life insurance. Yeah, that one. Thank you. So I skipped ahead the beginning of my presentation about protection. They really went, I could have talked a lot about health insurance and different ways that, there are health insurance programs out there. That is not my forte. I could also always refer you to someone who is a health insurance advisor because there are many, and there's different levels of knowledge of, do you have a group policy through work versus do you use the Affordable Care Act marketplace? But anyway, there's that protection as well. And the other thing that Robin skipped over for me was property and casualty. I will give a quick story about that before I mention life insurance. So how much coverage you have on protecting things like your home and your car. It needs to be checked, is I'll say it in the short term, but every couple of years when something changes, just to have it checked that you have enough coverage as you need. You might have added a patio to your home or a shed to hold your tools or something, just to have those things checked. My quick example is I am from Louisiana that got hit by a lot of hurricanes last year, and people were finding out and are still finding out 8 months after the hurricane that they did not have enough coverage to replace their home in that horrible event of actually not one, but 2 hurricanes. So having that checked by your insurance professional is very important to make sure that it's covered, because most of us cannot, replace our home if something happened to it. So just to have that checked out. So I'm going to go on to another kind of protection, which is life insurance. And it is another financial product. It actually can also be used as a sort of savings and investment product as well. So I'll talk about that in just a moment. But at its most basic, it provides a death benefit when the person who is insured dies. The benefit goes to the beneficiaries. And generally speaking, that benefit is received by them without having to pay taxes. The 2 main types are term and permanent. I like to use the comparison of renting versus buying a home. So term is only for a specific period of time. It has generally low premiums. It's also for it's only for a specific time. So when the policy retires or expires, it's gone. It's not there anymore. That death benefit is no longer available. Kind of like when you move out of a house that you have been renting, that's it. You just leave the house and you have no stake in that house whatsoever. However, if you buy a house and you sell it, you have a lot of potential that you can make money because of the equity that has been built in that home. And so on permanent life insurance, it can last your entire life. There are many options for how long you would like to pay premiums. Some people pay premiums their whole life. And then there are options where they can pay more in a shorter amount of time. Some of them offer premiums. So premiums that are guaranteed so that they won't increase as you get older. And also they can build cash value. And permanent policies are often used for things like college savings, retirement supplement, or what I call a personal pension, different things that you can use that cash value for, making it almost an investment vehicle or savings vehicle compared to term. But what you need, and we can go on, no, I think this is it. What you need is up to you and your financial professional, because they will be able to look at things like, how many kids you have and what's your plan for retirement. And there are many, many, many different options when it comes to life insurance. So talking to a professional is highly recommended, as is just having that life insurance, because it does, I find most of the time, it has I see almost a physical like dropping of the shoulders when people know that their family would be protected and taken care of after something happened to them. Okay, let me see. I'm going to skip the next one, and we're going to head on into retiring. So when my grandparents were, alive, retirement for them meant I don't work anymore. My grandparents lived through the Great Depression. That's when that was their prime working years. And so they remember how hard it was, and they just simply did not want to work anymore. But retirement these days looks completely different. People can retire. My husband's in the military, and when they talk about retirement, they talk about retirement in their early 40s. I have talked to teachers that want to retire before they're 50, because not that they want to do nothing, is they want to spend their time doing something else, whether that's another job, a lot of travel, moving into a different, work environment. So it looks completely different to everybody, but thinking about what your retirement will look like can be really powerful in terms of how do you want that to look well for you? What does financial wellness in retirement look like for you? So where will you live? Some people downsize, some people don't. How will you spend your time? How long will it last? That's the biggest change probably from 2 generations ago, is that retirement can be 30 and 40 years long. And so when you think about that, it's a whole nother, almost like a whole nother career. So what will that look like to you? What do you want to do in that time? We'll go on to the next one, please. So whatever you want to do is going to cost money, of course. So having a retirement strategy will take into account the cost of retirement. So of course, if you say you're retiring in 25 years, I cannot tell you with any certainty how much things will cost by then. But having an estimated budget will help you plan for that. And it's, again, going back to that idea of saving appropriately. So these are just some very general ways that retirement income is usually spread around. We need a place to live, the housing, you need you have to pay the bills, you have to get around. And healthcare on here only shows up at about 13%. I read a story over the weekend that healthcare is besides housing and food and day-to-day living, is the #1 expense that retirees have. So having a plan for that is also very important as well. So, oops, I accidentally skipped. I'm going to stay right here. Let's go on to the next one. So there's lots of different sources of retirement income that will be available to you. If you work in the United States, you probably have Social Security available to you. It is actually quite easy these days to find out your expected or estimated Social Security income. It will even break it down for you by different years. For example, if you retired 65 versus 70, if you go to ssa.gov, it's easy to set up an account and they can give that to you. Retirement accounts, those could be ones through your work. Many employers offer things like 401ks for their employees. And so taking advantage of those is usually recommended if that's available, but you can also set up your own retirement accounts. There are some that have tax advantages and some that are more geared toward growth. You can have a pension in retirement, whether that is from a job you had, like maybe time in the military or time with a company that still offers a pension. They are very rare these days. My grandfather worked for a railroad. That was a big deal for him, was getting his pension. But you can also create your own pension, and that's something that you can use a product like life insurance for. Annuities, where you take maybe some, you get an annuity is exactly what it sounds like. It's an annual amount that you steadily get. You can also break it down into months. What personal savings have you accumulated, and any other sources? I have a couple of clients that use their rental income. So from homes that they own or apartments that they own, they use that to supplement their retirement income as well. All right, and the next thing, and the final thing that we will discuss very quickly, is having an estate plan. Now, as many of us do, at least I certainly did when I was growing up and heard this phrase, I thought, wow, only rich people can have an estate plan because they must have an estate. Well, actually, there's a legal definition of an estate, and it's everything you own when you die. So it does not have to be that huge mansion. But having a plan to ensure that what you own goes to the right people at the right time is the purpose of an estate plan. It could be as simple as clarifying who your beneficiaries are on retirement plans and life insurance policies. It could, make sure those are updated when you want them to be. It could ensure that a home or other property is transferred in the way you wish it to be. Most people use estate planning to help minimize the estate tax. Estate taxes are expected to go up in the next several years. And so it does have an effect on those as well. Most people, when they talk to an estate planner or financial advisor, we can give an estimate of, okay, this is your current estate. If something happened to you tomorrow, this would be the tax burden on your family. And how can an estate plan help minimize that? Because most people do not want that to happen. And finally, there's something called probate. And probate is a whole process. If you've ever been close to someone who passed away and they had a will, or they did not have a will, you've probably heard the term probate. Probate can be limited by an estate plan. It can also, depending on the kind of estate plan, be completely skipped over. But that's also something that an estate planning attorney would be your best person to talk to about that. In many cases, financial advisors can refer you to those people as well. So there's many things to think about when it comes to that. And I actually do a seminar on this, on just estate planning, where I explain wills and trust, gifting and life insurance, and ways to not only plan for your family, but if you wanted to help support a charity or some other organization after you pass away, that things like that can happen. But I also can share more information about that with you on a one-on-one basis as well. So that is the end of my presentation. And I will turn it back over to Robin if we have any questions. And if we could actually go back up for a moment, Robin, to the link.
All the way to the top?
Yep, that has that link, or maybe we can just put it in the chat for people to sign up if they have any really specific questions that they would not be comfortable asking right now.
Excellent.
I don't know if you have it. Please stop recording for the Q&A.